Right. I think, yeah, I just had some technical problems, which I think were my fault entirely. But continue just on sound because I've got a problem with the camera. I'll try it again, but it for some reason will not pick up the video. No, it's yeah. So unfortunately, we'll just have to continue on sound. I think that should be okay.
That will be okay. It's just the
Yeah.
two of us, and
Two, yeah,
just
just
you perfectly
yeah.
clearly, so we can communicate without any difficulty.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'll reopen the inquiry and apologise for that delay. Can confirm that received yesterday the formal withdrawal of the objection from Church of Scotland trustees.
Yeah.
That's been passed to the Scottish Government Water Industry team, who are content for the objection to be withdrawn. Also received and read a copy of your closing submissions and its appendix, and that appendix is standard Scottish Water servitude conditions that we referred to yesterday.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'll just go on one point of clarification. I don't know if you want to say anything at this stage, Mr. O'Carroll.
I was really going to be guided by you, sir. I have the
Yeah.
I have my submissions in front of me, which are quite a bit shorter than I had imagined, because I thought I was going to have to address the points made in opposition. But now that the Church of Scotland has withdrawn its objection, I don't need to do that, and nothing that has been said by way of objection is now relevant to your consideration, and you may disregard anything said in objection to this because those objections have been withdrawn. So that rather leaves me with very much less to say. I do have it all put down in paper, I think, for clarity, and I do think it's helpful to do this because, of course, it's not just simply to you I'm addressing, but ultimately to the ministers. So I was going to simply ask what you would like. I can read out the narrative bits, leaving out the legal bits, or I could summarize what I've placed, or I could essentially, you could just tell me that it's taken as read, and I don't need to do that. I'm entirely in your hands. I think maybe a summary might be helpful, just to recap the main points.
Yeah, a very brief summary, I think, because it's often other people are sort of involved.
Certainly, so I think it probably is a bit tedious and a bit like going back to school if I'm standing at the front of the class just reading out the essay what I wrote.
Just a brief summary of main points, I think, if you could do that.
Well, naturally, then, as you'd expect, I'm asking you, sir, to recommend to the ministers that the compulsory purchase order before you, as document 1, is confirmed. And I've taken the opportunity to completely clarify the plots of land in question, which are every plot named in the schedule to the CPO apart from plot 1. Plot 1's in a class of its own because there's been separate private negotiations with that, and that land has now been conveyed to Scottish Water, so it's 2 to 6 only. But everything that's been said in relation in the statement of reasons relating to all aspects, but now no longer applicable to plot 1, I fully endorse and adopt for the purposes of my closing submissions also, in terms of the justification and the need for the scheme. Also, I've pointed out the fact that you've had the benefit of 3 highly qualified witnesses from Scottish Water for you to assist you in your consideration of this compulsory purchase order and your report to ministers. And they were available to you to answer any questions which you had. And they duly did that, as well as responding to 1 or 2 questions from the previous objective, Church of Scotland. At section 2 of my submissions, I set out, again, really just to have things placed down for the record, the full terms insofar as applicable in relation to the legal framework under the Water Industry Scotland Act of 2002. I obviously won't read that out. The core functions are then included, and this is basically what I've got there is essentially an unpacking of what's already contained within the statement of reasons. Then it's section 3, I set out what's in the public interest. And this is important because it might be the blindingly obvious thing, but obviously compulsory purchase is the exception, and that it is something that is done in the public interest when that public interest has been demonstrated. And in my submission, sir, that has been demonstrated amply for the twofold reasons I provide there at page 2, section 3 of my submissions. It's clearly understandable that the public has a need for sewerage services. The wastewater treatment works that we're dealing with provides that for the entire town of Forres, as you clarified in questioning yourself. And that is a necessary utility. It needs to be there for the public good. So not very much more needs to be said in relation to that. Not very much more either needs to be said in relation to the other main public interest point. As you'll have seen from the virtual site inspection, and obviously your knowledge of dual railways, and the one here going between Inverness and Aberdeen, we have very, very fast, longer, frequent trains going between those two cities. It's a clear and present, it's a clear risk that the present situation that you've seen in the walkthrough video, that is clearly unsatisfactory arrangement that is in existence at the moment, that is recognized by all parties, that having the nursery crossing at Bogton is clearly unsatisfactory with, and in fact it discourages, as Mr. Wilson has pointed out, I think Mr. Drummond pointed out, discourages the proper maintenance of the site. So not only is it dangerous, it prevents the first aim being achieved. But clearly having articulated lorries going across the dual railway every other day is clearly a flagrant risk to the public safety, not only for the drivers, but even more seriously, one can imagine terrible consequences for rail passengers as well if the worst, the unthinkable ever happened. The plan put in place in conjunction and at the behest of Network Rail is something that would obviate that completely, because now there's a new flyover access taken off the A96, completely going over the railway, with obviating the risk entirely, and thereafter taking the proposed bridge access from the southwest of the site, using the Waterford Road and the Invererne Road down at that part of down to the west of the site. But again, there I point out the urgency of the matter. Again, that's a matter I think that you have already clearly acknowledged and understood, sir, that we have an absolute deadline of the 6th of October 2022. That's a deadline that might not have seemed too bad when it was first raised back in October 2017, but we're fast approaching it. And in the time after this inquiry until matters then proceed, we'll have to have the construction of the bridge from scratch, plus the upgrading of the road and all the ancillary works as well. So time is indeed very, very short. And in that regard, I'd say I'm grateful to you, sir, for acceding to my suggestion that we have written submissions today, or closing submissions today, rather than having matters elongated yet further by having them in writing later. So we have the main points in the public interest which are set out there. The other point that perhaps would be a question to be asked in general terms, and it has been raised by in Cross briefly by Mr. De Paula for the church, but I think is worth mentioning again, is the reason why title and nothing else is required. And I set those out at three main reasons for that at section 4 of my closing submissions. The first reason is total capital cost, which is a very high one, all at public expense, and the concomitant need for control, having expended that sum of money. The next one, it relates to the question of the requirement for certainty of those works being carried out in the public interest, which a lesser right, such as a servitude, would not guarantee. And finally, the other third point I've set out in full there, but I'm just going to summarize just now, is that it's really a matter of fairness to all landowners who may require to take access across the newly constructed bridge and Hall Road and improved Hall Road, if it were to proceed further to this project. And allowing all of those parties access is a matter of fairness to them, and those ones that have given up title voluntarily by way of private negotiation with Scottish Water. And that is something that can only be granted by Scottish Water alone, if indeed it has ownership. And finally then, at point 5 of my submissions, I look at the terms of the confirmation sought. I've set out the relevant parts of the schedule to the 1947 Act, which we've both made reference to simply in passing about the future actions that can now be taken with regard to confirmation of the CPO. The only requirements are that they've been properly served and all of the necessary formalities have been conducted beforehand. Sir, you have all of the documentation which demonstrates that's been done. Then thereafter, the only thing that remains is the question of whether or not you wish to consider modifications, recommending modifications or not before the Scottish ministers. And clearly, as I narrated yesterday, when Church of Scotland announced their desire to withdraw their objection, I did point out that given that it was conditional, it would require to be done and would require submission from me with regard to the terms of that condition of their withdrawal, and the terms that then I would then require to submit to you as being an appropriate modification further to that condition of withdrawal. So after discussion, which you obviously saw, witnessed, and were party to, Church of Scotland withdrew, and they agreed without any negotiation, but they agreed at that stage yesterday, at day 2 of the inquiry, to withdraw their objection on the condition that they had rights of access in accordance with Scottish Water's usual servitude conditions. And even before providing the written servitude conditions that you now have today as an appendix to my closing submissions, I outlined those in general terms, and the main parts of them to do with not hindering access by Scottish Water's vehicles, making good any damage, and indemnifying any loss, all of which are perfectly reasonable terms, which Mr. Powell seemed content, well, was content to accept, and that's the end of the matter as far as he's concerned. And those terms are now appended to these submissions. They're not terribly complex. They're a single page, and they're written in plain language and are self-explanatory. So, in summation, then, sir, the only matter I then have to ask you is that you will confirm the CPO as put forward by Scottish Water in the exercise of its powers, and in the exercise, and request that the Scottish ministers, in the exercise of their own confirmation powers, confirm the CPO subject to the minor detailed modification in respect of plots 2 and 3 only, which would be subject to the appended standard servitude conditions, which you have appended to these closing submissions today. And I would move you to make that recommendation to the minister, sir. So that's my summation of what I've written, and I'm here if you would like to clarify anything else from me, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. O'Carroll. Well, I'll just try my video actually. Yeah, has that come through?
You are now visible.
Right. Yes, the other application which was running for the cameras,
Yeah,
has now deleted itself. So, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, the one point I had was, which you've answered already, was at the bottom of page 2, at the last paragraph, where you're talking about the plots. Plot 1 was omitted, but you've explained that that was subject to separate agreements with Altair Estates. My sort of secondary question from that was, when you put forward what you're seeking from Scottish Water in terms of modification, you've not sought that plot 1 be deleted from the CPO. Is that something that is immaterial, or that you
Well, clearly it's not a matter requiring compulsory purchase because it has been voluntarily purchased. So, yeah, I think it was a matter of formality. I wasn't going to. I wanted to keep the modifications to a minimum because I wanted to keep
Yeah.
things as clear as possible. But I think
That's,
it's a matter of logic and formality. Then, and indeed, I've made it clear that it's plots 2 to 6 that we're interested in, and
yeah,
that plot 1 clearly does not form part of the request for confirmation and no longer forms part of our no longer forms part of the compulsory purchase order.
right. Thank you. Yeah, I've got, so I read it all through. No more questions on it. In fact, thank you very much for getting that to me so quickly. Are there any other matters at all you wish to raise?
No, sir. The main thing is that obviously all of this could have been conducted by way of written representations, but I did feel, and my clients felt, that it was important that we had live discussions, both for the evidence and here today. And the main purpose being that we would like you to be absolutely sure that you have all the information you require to make your decision with regard to confirmation. So I'm here entirely at your disposal for that. I personally have nothing else to ask or to raise myself.
Yes, I mean, I'm content that I've got all the information that I need.
Thank you for that indication then, sir.
Right. But nothing else. I mean, one thing I would say is that I will give this sort of due priority, given well, the timescale that things have been going and also deadlines that have to be met.
Yeah, I
So I would
appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
give that due priority. So unless there's anything else, just thank you very much for your participation, Mr. O'Carroll. It's been very helpful for the inquiry, and close the inquiry at that point.
Right. Thank you. I have nothing else come through. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Bye.